Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. It is me. I'm Dr. Joy, and I'm excited. I'm excited to be here with you guys again for I don't even know what morning. This is day 32 of the 40-day countdown. My goodness. Um, I ain't know 40 days was gonna feel like this. And it doesn't feel bad for real life, but we are on the Hope and Her podcast, and we are in the first fruits to 40 countdown, right? And so we've talked about a lot of things just in the few days that we've been here. um some of the highlights have been health and wellness, and we've talked a little bit about money. We've talked a little bit about being prepared for life. We've talked a lot about worship and different things of that nature and what worship looks like. And we talked about this idea that first fruits is a lifestyle, right? First fruits is this idea that we get to give God our best and whatever that looks like. And so our next guest, listen, I am so excited for this guest to be here for lots of reasons. This guest was one of my college professors. And this is how I remember. You know what? Actually, I'm gonna let her tell you how she knew me, and we'll go from there. I'm gonna ask this person how she knew me, but um, this person, she was one of my college professors, Dr. Dawn Hinton. Dr. Dawn Hinton. She is an administrator at Saginaw Valley State University, and she just is an all around cool person to know. Right? Hails from the city of Flint, and she is a sociologist. I'm going to bring Dawn on because we're going to talk about an interesting topic today, and I'm excited about that topic and about how that topic looks like first fruits. But Dr. Dawn, before we even get into the topic, tell the people how you know me.
Good morning. Okay, first of all, I love this little intro music. So I was, kind of jamming to the music. Um,
Right.
so I know. So I know Joy because Joy was a student in the class I remember is the sociology of family. I taught a class, many
Mhm.
classes. Amongst those was a class called sociology of family, and Joy was a conscientious student. So she was concerned about her grades. So she came to my office because she didn't do as well as she thought she was. She wasn't doing as well as she thought she should, which is what students should do. They should come and ask. And so we talked about ways that she could actually improve her grade, things that she could do in order to improve on exams and assignments, but just really kept in touch since then. So I've had the opportunity to observe Joy through her many educational experiences. So the bachelor's degree, and then also at earning a master's, and then the doctorate, which I'm very, very proud of. So I'm taking credit for that.
You're welcome. Thank
Even
you.
though I didn't teach her in graduate school at all, but I just very, very proud of the work that she's done so far, and excited by what is coming for her. So I had a lovely time getting to know what is now Dr. Joy, but what was before Joy, simply Joy. So excited uh, to know her and also to be here today. So excited
Thank you.
to have the opportunity just to talk.
And it's still Joy. My mama named me Joy. You can call me Joy.
Um,
It's still
um,
Joy. And it's funny, like, so my side of that story is that I was not like, so college was a bit of a culture shock for me. And it's actually will lead us into what we're talking about today. It's a bit of a culture shock for me. Not that I hadn't been to school. I was in a magnet program growing up, probably amongst the top of the students in the spaces that we were in. Like, definitely bred to succeed. We were bred to, I tell everybody, if you were in those magnet programs, particularly, I don't know about any but the ones that I was in, but in the program that I was in, I was definitely bred to bred to compete, right? Like,
mhm.
who could get done with this first, who could do that first, who could be the best at it, who could be the top of the class, and like grades almost became weaponized. Right. This is how I felt about it coming
Mhm,
back after looking at it.
mhm.
And then you get to school and you think you're smart. Like, you just believe that you're smart because you've come from the cream of the crop from where you are, and you come into a space with people who are smarter than you, like in a real way, not just like edging you up. It's like, wait, how did y'all get that? Like, how did y'all do that? So on my side, and being very conscientious of grades, like she said, I don't know if I failed the test. I can't even remember if I failed it or got a B, but either way, it would have been just as bad. So I just remember I didn't do well on this test, and I was a couple tests that had, and then I was like, oh, maybe the first one is a fluke. The second one I didn't do good. I was like, nah. So I went, and I was like, I don't know what's happening. I know the stuff. I'm reading my stuff, and I know da da da. And she was like, okay, I'm not sure. And at first, I think this was my view of my side of the story. I felt like she thought I was playing, like, like she don't know, she ain't whatever, because she was just kind of like, okay, and I was like, no, seriously, I know this stuff. I'm not, but it's not translating. And what Dawn did for me actually was something that I took through all of the degrees, the bachelor's, first master's, the second master's, nail school in that order, or well, nail school was in between the two masters, and then on to my doctorate. And really, it was test taking skills. And what she said
Mm,
was, so she had me read through something or whatever, and then she was like, so what's the response? And I told her the response, and she was like, well, why is that the response? And I was like, because it's the one. She's like, you didn't read to the end, and you didn't read to the, like, you didn't finish the question. And I was like, okay. She was like, so slow down. It's not a race. Read through the question, read through every answer. Now, as simple as that was, it made me stop and pause while I was doing it. Now, there's a lesson in there. Y'all know I like the little spiritual piece in there. There's a lesson in there for somebody that sometimes you just got to finish and get to the end, right?
mhm,
Sometimes
mhm,
you just have to read to the end of the question so that you can get the correct result, right?
mhm,
Sometimes we got results that are off or partially correct because we just think we know or it looks right based on what we know
mhm,
instead of
mhm,
taking time to, examine the full thing. Anyways, and so that is where I believe our relationship began, like she said. But but over the years, like she said, we've just become close and cool. And Dawn is a very special human. And so, without further ado, let's get into our topic. And so, we talk about first fruits being a lifestyle, and Dawn is in the educational field. And one of the things that I know and that I believe in education, right?
mhm.
And I'm believing in it in lots of different ways. But I do believe that what we learn, we can give back to God, right? In our first fruits. And so when I talked to Dawn about being on the show, she talked about this idea of, like, and I'm gonna just kick it over to Dawn about how she wants to kind of talk about what education as first fruits looks like. What does educate this need for education look like? But go ahead, Dawn. I'm gonna kick it right
I
on over.
think no, I appreciate that. I think the idea of education is a first fruit. I think that who we are as people is a reflection of who we are in God. And so
Mhm.
the idea of education as first fruit is something that we're giving to ourselves, right? It's an investment that we're making in ourselves so that we can then contribute in ways that's going to be meaningful. So that's kind of the first contribution that we're giving, right?
Mhm.
Not only to ourselves, but then also to God, because in being educated, we're able to kind of contribute to the world in really meaningful ways. And I'm
Absolutely.
talking about education in kind of this very general sense. I talked with Joy earlier this week about the value of college degrees. And I think that what's happening now is really a disservice to the whole idea of an arts and sciences
Mhm.
major or arts and sciences education, what some people would call liberal arts. Um, but the value of that, the value of being in a space where you have the time to sit back and think about various disciplines, you know, extensively, right? You have the
Absolutely.
opportunity to have conversations with people about it. You have this expert in the field who's able to talk with you through some of the major challenges that are happening within that field. Um,
Mhm.
and the value of being in a institution that has which I'm going to say something that I think that people, oh man, there's just so much that's wrapped up in this that people would not necessarily see the advantage of. But the value of being in a place where you have a general education curriculum, where we
Mhm.
are expecting you to learn just a little bit about everything so that as you enter the world, right, the fruit that's going to manifest is something that you have already taken in and you're able to take that knowledge and then apply it to your lived experience. There are occasions where people, and you have to jump in, Joy Girl, because I could
Well,
talk forever.
I want to stop. We're gonna take our knowledge and apply it to our lived experience.
Mm-hmm,
Listen, y'all. And this is the part. This is where I agree, right? Like there are some things that I am using now
mm-hmm,
from probably, I don't know, first masters, and I get to use it in my entrepreneurial world, right? Um, there are some things that I wouldn't have known if I didn't go to school.
mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But there is this, I'm going to call it an argument or a point of view, and I don't know where I sit on it. And if you are joining us today, say hi to us because your hi matters. And if you're catching this on replay, just tell me that you're catching it on replay. I'll come back and say hi to you. But listen to me. If you've ever been in a place where you're wondering about whether or not you should get a degree or whatever the case is, or whether or not, and this is not to for anybody to feel bad. If it's not your path, it's not your path about getting a degree. And I'm not downing school because I got 4 of them, right? It's not that. But we talked a little bit about this week. And this thought came up about, why should I get a degree, right? Why should
Mm-hmm.
I get a degree when there are people without degrees who are making X amount of dollars, millions of dollars, whatever the dollars? And I think lots of people are comparing themselves to like a Mark Zuckerberg or somebody or whatever the case is. Like, let's just be for real. Like, lots of people are comparing themselves to people with different economic standings and different things of that nature. So when I talk about it in that way, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why is that important? Why is education important in that way, right?
So I think that education is important, not only in terms of income, and we can talk some about that, but also in terms of you being a person who can take in what's happening in the world and interpret it in ways that make sense. And I think that
Mm,
when we are not well-rounded in terms of our educational experiences, we're doing ourselves a disadvantage. We're not able to. So, for example, I taught a lot of general education classes. I taught Sociology 111, which was the
mhm,
intro to sociology. And we talked about social structures, and we talked about the impact that they have on who you are. We talked about religion. We talked about family. And it's not psychology. It's not social work. And people kind of get us mixed up with those two fields. But essentially what it does is it talks to you about what's happening in bureaucratic structures and how to interpret what's happening there, how to think about how that's impacting how you behave, right?
mhm,
Um, it also talks about how do we interact with people who are different than us, right? How can we understand the perspectives that other folks, that other cultures have, right? How
mhm.
can we come into a situation and not believe that we are doing it the right way and everybody else is doing it wrong,
Yeah, yeah.
right? How do we
Mhm,
come into a space understanding who people are? How do we come to a space understanding what they have faced to get to that space?
mhm,
And then interacting with them accordingly. It just makes you a better person. It makes you a
mhm,
better citizen. You and this is a part of the problem. And I share with Joy, I don't think that we're doing a good job as educators talking with people about what the value of that thing is, or how you can use that to your advantage. If indeed you are simply looking to get a better job, you can go into that space and say, you know what, I have studied diverse cultures. I understand how people operate. I know how the system impacts X, Y, and Z. I understand how it impacts women, how it impacts, various people from various social locations in ways that it doesn't impact other people. So
mhm.
I have an advantage here. I can help your company because I have that skill, right? I don't
Absolutely.
know that we talk to people about it in that way. And we should, because we're doing ourselves a disservice. Because now the narrative that's taking over is this ain't worth it.
Mhm,
It costs too much, and we can talk about that too. It costs too much, and I got too much debt, and I didn't really learn anything. They just made me take these classes. All of that we're hearing now. But we're not hearing the other side of that about how it does creating you the ability to think through various situations in order to interact with the world in an informed way, not just interacting with the world, because people can come out and say all kinds of things. We've learned a whole lot about alternative facts. I didn't know that it was possible. Facts I thought were facts, right?
mhm.
It happened. We've learned a whole lot about how people are now interpreting the world in ways that are not influenced by fact, right?
Exactly.
How do you, as an educated citizen, wade through all of that information.
Absolutely. And I believe, and so in that way, I think you're right. Like the critical thinking skills, the
Mhm,
ability to stop and pause, the ability to finish it out, right? Like
mhm.
I'll take that one lesson from the beginning of my educational career, and I'm gonna say that was a first fruits offering there,
Mhm,
because
mhm.
had I not had that, and I think I was actually in, even though I've taken more than one class with you, I was in, I believe that was the one-on-one class, the sociology one-on-one, because had I not taken that class, had I not had that conversation, and I had that same experience somewhere else, I don't know that I would have gotten
Mhm.
the response or the experience in that. So how can we in this world, like you talking about, like encouraging people to, to be educated and that kind of thing? First of all, how do we make that? How do we, you know, in a faith-based space, right? Like how does that give people hope? How does that become a first fruit? How does that become an offering?
And I think that there's this narrative that's taken over that devalues the study of arts and sciences and humanities. There's something that's happening in our society where we are saying that education is not worth it. Um, so let me say this: when I went to college, I paid $1,500 for an entire year of tuition for my undergrad. And it wasn't that long ago. I'm not deathly old. I'm a little bit older, right? I'm like you know, a big
Fifteen
sister.
hundred dollars a semester, or no, you said a year.
A year,
Yeah,
$1,500 a
yeah.
year. I remember because I got like $2,000. You know how you have your little high school graduation party.
Hmm.
So I got $2,000. I was so excited to spend this money. I was like, oh my gosh, I can get this and this and this. And my mom was like, no, you're going to use that to pay your tuition, your first year's tuition. I was like, okay. So I used it to pay it, had a little bit left over, but my entire year was paid $1,500. I think that what's happening in our society is that state schools, which were historically funded by our state government, are still funded, but at a lesser rate, which means that more of the cost of education is now the responsibility of the student. And the state is no longer assisting people in covering that cost. So when they
Hmm.
cut back on this cost, the argument that they're making is, I'm not exactly sure what the argument is, we're not worth the investment, which is
Hmm.
what I'm hearing. We're
It's,
not worth the investment.
I
We
think
don't want
that's
to
the
give
message. I don't know if that's the argument, because
exactly, that's the message I get. Right, right,
okay.
right. But I think that people recognize the value of this.
Mhm.
What I don't want to happen is that only certain people get the opportunity to go to an arts and sciences institution where they're able to, sit and think. I believe that we all should have that chance, right? I was listening to NPR a couple years ago, and there was a woman who wrote a book that was composed of letters to books, right? Letters that she wrote to a book. It's like I
Mhm.
would write you a letter, Joy, and say, Joy,
Mhm.
hey, how you doing? Whatever, whatever. She wrote letters to books. And I thought that was the most frivolous thing that anybody could spend their time. Girl, she sold this book. Lots of people bought this book, right? But the thing that I got from that was she had the time to sit and think. I think that sometimes we're in a space where we are
Mm.
moving and we're thinking about how do we get the next dollar, how are we going to make the next thing, or how are we going to get our kids into this, or how are we going to get our, and absolutely all of those things are important, right? But it's
Yeah.
also important for you to be able to sit and think.
So now you're talking about language, because and because of my recent experience
Mhm,
where I was in and I've shared a little bit of this story where, we're just in the hustle and bustle of life, in the hustle and bustle of doing
mhm.
the this, the that, the other, trying to, make ends meet, being an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
And so the creative space was
yeah,
no longer. It was like, how many
exactly.
times can I do this thing? And yeah, sure, I made an okay, amount doing whatever this thing was, but it was really the frantic pace
Yes,
of trying to figure out how can I do this thing to make this amount of money or whatever the case was, that there was no space.
that's right.
There was literally no space to be creative. There
Mhm.
was no space in creative in this point, it was to think about whatever the next thing is. And so I love what you said, because I heard something different when you said it. I love what you just said. This lady wrote a book that was letters to books, and she sold that book, and she sold lots of these books apparently. And so and it was because she had time to sit and think. How many of us, for those of you who are still listening, how many of us just need time to be able to think, and
Mhm.
the time to think gets away from us,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
um and education is a route for that. Like, education is a route to be able to, you made me a believer. You've made me a believer, because education is a route to be able to
Mhm.
be in a
Mhm.
space where that is what
And
your sole job is to do.
it's
Go ahead.
structured, guided thinking, right? And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
we're sharing with you, and I tell this to my intro students all the time. I want to be able to have a conversation with you, which is why we read stuff, right? Which is why I give you tests to make sure that you understand what we're supposed to be talking about. I want to be able to talk to you from my sociological lens. I want you to be able to have conversations with people from that lens. Let's think about what that means. Now, we all have these opinions. We have lived experiences that have led us to the place where we are, right? We've never thought about what those opinions mean, not only for us, but for other people, right? Where is that coming from, first of all? And then also, are there other people who are thinking like you? And people who have sat and thought about it and spent a
Absolutely.
whole lot of time. Let's benefit from their
Yeah.
learning, right? Let's sit down and read some of the reflections that they had. Does that apply to your life? It doesn't. I'm not surprised, because this was their lens. And
Eh,
this, okay, so how do you then take that and then apply that to what your lived experience is? And what you'll find is that it's not going to be unique to you. It's going to be something that other people are also experiencing, who actually have those same kinds of, I call them social location, but demographics. So
mhm.
Black women who are heterosexual, who are living in the US, have these kinds of lived experiences in common, right? And they're different
Absolutely.
than white men who have this, and this, um, because we experience the world differently. And those are the things that we have an opportunity to think about. So we begin to understand people a bit better. We understand why folks have these kinds of opinions and ideas about this is
Yeah.
how the world operates, because, right? It's not unique to them. It's something that's common within that population. And we learned that because somebody guided us through those conversations. And that is
Absolutely.
essentially what we're trying to do. We just want you to think about why things are happening the way they're happening.
And this is where I deviate just a little bit, because I do believe that there are places where I do believe that there are places where you can get training, and not, I'm not going to say to the level or to the degree, right, of, whatever, that you can be trained for the thing that you want to do, or whatever the case
Oh,
is. And so
absolutely.
my without it being a higher education institution, right?
Mhm, for
And
sure.
so I am 1,000% for training. I'm a
Hmm.
1,000% for training and education, education in that way. And as I think about, like, how this relates to, again, first fruits to God, I'm like, I want to give God the best. I don't want to just, like, if I don't want to just give God whatever is just, left over, or whatever is just, laying around, a handful of seeds that we don't know what they are, and we put them in the ground. Like, I don't want that. Like, I want to know what I'm planting,
Hmm.
and I want some guidance on how to plant it, right? And
Hmm.
then I want to be able to teach somebody else. And I think that's the cycle of education that I believe is the first fruit, is that when somebody knows what they have, they can plant it themselves, right? And
Hmm.
then they can show somebody else how to plant it, who can then show someone else, right?
Okay. Okay.
And I believe that that's important. And so that's even one of the reasons why, as a therapist, and again, been a therapist for a decade, so I don't talk against therapy in any way. I also know, but as a therapist, I know that everything isn't for clinical therapy. Some people need mental health coaching, right? Because they don't need a diagnosis, right? They have a situation that is
Mhm.
situation. So they need a space where they can have these conversations,
Mhm.
deal
Mhm.
with the conversations. Same thing as
Yes.
you're saying, right? They deal with the conversations as they are in that space. Now, that's a little more specific, why, well, yeah, something clinical may be a little bit more general, higher level, whatever the case may be. And so, and I believe that there are a bunch of well-meaning people
Mhm.
who try to help in different arenas, whether it's at, even probably in the educational arena too, right? Where there are a bunch of well-meaning people who are not trained.
Say more about that.
So, for instance, like I said about being a therapist, right? There are a lot of people who be like, "Well, I want a counselor, I want a coach," and they jump out and they say they're this thing.
Oh, yeah.
Their counselor, their coach, or whatever the case is, and they mean with, or they just, a great going church member, and they really just, they love the Lord and they want to help,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
and they're saying things
That sound good.
that sound good, right? But that
Mhm,
really are not helping the situation at all. Now, I don't have a problem with said person helping. I want said person to get training and
mhm, mhm.
to be able to help, right? And so that was one of the reasons I created the program for coaches, right? For people, like, you don't have to be a licensed practitioner to give people hope, to coach
Mhm,
people or whatever, but you do have to be trained.
mhm.
There's a need for training, right? And
Right.
so
And
likewise, I make that parallel to a need for
let me ask
education
this
here.
question though. So
Mhm.
there's a set of knowledge that you believe these folks need in
Mhm.
order to be able to effectively help. The same thing is true here, right?
Yes,
That's the
absolutely.
argument I'm making. There's a set of knowledge that these
Absolutely.
people who have been to school for 12 years to
Mhm.
learn a whole lot about this narrow topic that they can actually share with you. I'm
Mhm.
with you on that.
Yeah. And
I love it.
so with that being said, so in some ways, so again, so I do think education is super important and is definitely an offering back, because had I not, right, like, let's just be clear, had I not gone to school, I would not be able to serve the world in the way that I serve the
Mhm,
world.
mhm,
I just wouldn't, because in order to be a therapist, you do have to have a master's degree, right? Like, it's not an option, right? I
mhm,
wouldn't be able to serve the world. But here's the thing, because I went to school, I'm able to teach a lesson, like you said, to this narrow space
mhm, mhm.
that can help a lot of people that I may
Right.
not touch otherwise.
Mhm.
And I think that's what a first fruit harvest is about, right? Like, how does it help the multitudes, right?
Mm.
And I think in a great way, like, this is how education can, like, and again, so I don't know that I believe it's everybody's,
No, no, I don't. I
right? I don't.
agree. I agree. So I don't think it's for everybody, but I do want to address, and I know we only have a few
Yeah,
minutes. I
go
want to
for it.
address the kind of the elephant in the room, the idea that it costs too much,
Oh yeah,
right?
because it costs.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that this kind of formal education is for everybody. We need to have plumbers. Absolutely. We need
Period.
to have welders. We need to have people who are able to do that. But we also need people who can think critically, who can reason logically, who can communicate effectively.
Mhm.
And there are some folks who believe that they can get that in other spaces. I understand. I understand. And I'm not going to beat people up over that. But I really do believe that the college experience is an opportunity for you to gain that, to gain this knowledge, this very general knowledge. The
Mhm.
elephant in the room is that it does cost too much.
It does.
And that is not worth it. I think that there are systems at play, and this is again my sociologist, at work here,
Talk about it. Talk about it.
that's working to disadvantage certain population. I learned that in college. Disadvantage certain populations who don't have access to resources, and so they're creating a situation where college is so expensive that only the extremely wealthy will see the value in it. Which is a problem, because not only are we talking about, a lot of times we talk about people who control wealth, right?
Yes.
We talk about people
Yes.
who have the money, who make the decisions, that kind of thing. So there are a population of people who control wealth, but there are also a population of people who control the production of ideas. So what we see as truth, what we see as right, what we see as reasonable, there's also a population who have the ability to control that intellectual production. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Right?
Mm, mhm,
Um, Absolutely, you are worth the investment so that you can be a part of this, of the group who's making the decision about the direction that our culture should go, the direction that our nation should go, the information that's going to be shared with our current population. Now, one of the things I told Joy earlier when we were talking was, um, the data has always been the same. The more education you get, the more money you make. Plain
mhm,
and simple. Now, I
mm.
know people always throw out, well, you can be a plumber and make this much. We don't need that many plumbers. We don't need all y'all to be plumbers. We don't need all y'all to be welders. We need some people to be thinking, right?
Yeah.
And people with less than a high school diploma make, oh, girl, I got the data because, I like evidence.
Mhm, mhm.
People with less than a high school diploma on average make about $708. People with a doctoral degree make 2,000 per week. not per month, per week. 708 per week. Doctoral degree make over $2,000 per week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's consistent across the board. Now, I'm not saying that every single individual that you know with a doctorate makes $2,000. On average, they do. There are some people
Mm-hmm.
who make much more than that.
Yeah,
There are some
yeah.
people who make a bit
Much
less.
less than
That's
that. Sure.
the nature of what we're talking about in terms of the median, the point at which half fall above and half fall below. And then also in terms of unemployment, people with doctorate degrees are less likely to be unemployed than those people who have high school diplomas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can take that and do with that what we will, but I think that this has been consistent over time. This has not fluctuated. This has not been, 1 year the people with doctorates made less than the people with high school diplomas. That's never been the case. It has
Mm-hmm.
always been the case over the last 20 or 30 years that I've been following the data.
Mm-hmm.
The more education, the more money you make. So I think if our concern is simply about making money, the data kind of bears that out, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do come into the world with a little bit more debt, right? I understand you do,
Mm-hmm.
but you also come into the world with more experience, with more knowledge, with more ways that you can interact with people in informed ways.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can have these informed conversations. You can articulate what it is that you're trying to communicate effectively because you have the time to sit and think about how to make that happen.
Absolutely. And again, I don't disagree with that so much. I know it's not everybody's experience, let's be clear. I will say this too, about the minimizing of the degree, the educational realm,
Mhm,
whatever the case
mhm,
is. Like, it happens in lots of places, right? Because sometimes the elephant in the room is people who hang doctor on front of their names without it being earned, right? Um, so now it's like, oh well, I can just go get one from somewhere else.
mhm.
Mm.
Yeah,
All right, we can talk about that for a time, for a time. And but it is a space where I think that we have to be very careful about what and how we consume what it, about what it is. And yes, you do come into the world with more debt, and sometimes I even weigh like, man, should did I need that degree?
mhm,
Now, and had I had a little bit more um guidance in that space, initially, I may would have taken the path differently, but I would have still, I gotta say, I would have still taken the path, right?
mhm,
There may have been some curves that I would have done a little differently, or whatever the case is, or there might have been some things I would have completely bypassed. However, I, like I said, I know that every experience has led me to this point, right?
mhm,
So I don't even have the space to be like, yeah, no, this doesn't work. What I'm saying? Like, this doesn't work when that's the path that I've taken. So I will say, like, I do empathize though in the spaces where it's like, yeah, that looks like a lot, but you said something that I think is key, and I hope that whoever hears this, and usually before the show we pray in and all those kinds of things. We both had some technical things this morning, but one of the things that I usually pray is that whoever hears this, when they hear this, that it is the word that they need for right now, right?
mhm,
Because
mhm.
they're catching, because people are catching it live. There'll be some folks that catch it on the replay and different things of that nature. And so, if you're thinking about education, go and get more information, right? There are programs and things that will help and assist in paying for education for
That's
different
right.
reasons, particularly if you're a non-traditional student, particularly if you are under a certain um
Financial threshold. Yeah.
financial threshold. The
Mhm,
poverty line was hitting in the head there. But yes, if you're under a certain financial threshold and different things of that nature.
mhm, mhm.
um and also have some conversations about what it is that you really want and what the path
Yes.
looks like to get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Because yes, this the path?
That's key.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Is the other thing the path? That's just as much a maybe as the other thing. But whatever it is, whenever you hear this space, the one thing I want you to hear from a first fruits perspective is that whatever you do, you got to be trained at it.
Mm,
Whatever you do, you got to be trained at it. Even if you work at McDonald's, Burger King, whatever. And I'm not saying that in a
that's
pejorative way, as if that is a lower than or less than job. But we've talked about whatever the field is, whether you're a plumber or a preacher, you got to be trained.
good.
And
That's right.
so, so no matter what it is that you want to do, when you get quiet and get in with yourself and decide what it is that you want to do, whatever the path is to your desires, I'm going to make the point that it is worth the investment.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the path is to your desires is worth the investment. Now, it's going to be important to find the path, right? And so education really is one of those paths. There are some, like I said, there are other paths there, and this is not the space to go down all of them or whatever the case may be. But you are worth the investment. Like while I invested in education and a lot of money in education, I've invested in coach. When I wanted to be a coach, I've invested in coaching to the nth degree. But it was because I understood, just like I would pay for a degree, right? Just so I would pay to work towards a degree. I will pay to get the training that I need from somebody who has done this thing before.
Right.
Whatever this thing is for you. And so for those of you who are wondering what this is, if you need some help trying to figure out what this is and the strategy and all of it, hit me up. We have a strategy called Decide What Your This Is. Because sometimes we be wasting money trying to figure out the this.
Mm-hmm.
That's a word in and of itself. But like figure out what your this is so that you can work towards that. And as we talk about how that's a lifestyle and an offering, if we're in a place and we're giving it our best at all times, we're operating in the place of excellence. We're operating in our best. And I think that that's super important for the start of things, right? So give yourself the first fruit of excellence. And I thank Dawn for being with us today because I believe education is important. And when we talk about this idea of the need in our community,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
that's even more than the education and the elephant in the room for me. It's a need in our community.
Absolutely.
It's a need in our community. So I'm going to leave you all with that. You all have a blessed and amazing day, and we will see you in the morning at 6 a.m. for another episode of First Fruits to 40 on the 40-day countdown to my 40th birthday. And I think tomorrow I got a book I want to give away. Got a couple books that I want to give away. I'm excited about like the things that God is doing. If you're interested and you want to stay connected, just write connected in the chat and I'll come back in. I'll connect with you. Have a blessed and amazing day, and we'll talk soon.